the story that just won't go away, and I saw it again last night. The Steelers just have so much interest in Niner wide receivers. So first it was Ayuk, then it was Debo. And last night on Steeler Nation, I read an article saying that the Steelers are interested in Jauan Jennings, who no-showed the voluntary minicamp. What do you think? I mean, are the Niners are they going forward with the trio of their receivers, or is somebody going to be sacrificed? And is Jennings going to wind up in Pittsburgh? I mean, they have 11 receivers, and probably 9 of them are good enough to make the roster, and they probably only have 5 or 6 spots. So there's an abundance of riches there at wide receiver. They love, Clay Kubiak said that when I asked him about Jacob Cowing, he described him as a great football player. I mean, NFL coaches throw around compliments like manhole covers this time of the year when it comes to rookies. They never want to say good things. He said he was a great football player. I asked Purdy about throwing to Cowing, and you could see him light up and say, hey, this guy's electric, and this guy's got, he can take the top off the defense, and he's really accountable. And you could see he's trusted. He's like going to be a trusted agent. He's not just a burner. This guy's going to be where I expect him to be. So both Kubiak and Purdy were glowing about Cowing. What do you think? I mean, and obviously Pearsall was a first-round pick. Is JJ to the Steelers something, or is that just a blogger in Pittsburgh just floating out names?
It's a very interesting conversation, and I have a lot of thoughts on it. From top to bottom, the 49ers might have the deepest wide receiver room in the NFL. Do they have the best top 2 in Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel? Maybe not. Bengals are really good with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. The Dolphins are really good with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. The Eagles are excellent with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. But from top to bottom, I'm not sure there's a team in the NFL that has the depth at the wide receiver position that the Niners have. They've built that room into a really, really good unit with a bunch of different wide receivers who are all a little bit different. And it gets me thinking a little bit. The 49ers placed that second-round tender on Jauan Jennings, so he's scheduled to get a pay raise this year, a little less than $5 million. If a team were to sign Jennings in free agency, they no longer can. He can't sign with the team now. It's too late for that. They would have had to have given him a new contract and surrendered a second-round pick for Jauan Jennings. I didn't think that was going to happen. Jennings is a really solid player. He's not worth a new deal and a second-round pick, but did the 49ers put that tag on him and then draft his replacement in Ricky Pearsall, who is a slot receiver, and Jauan Jennings is a slot receiver, knowing that at some point, maybe, if a team that is in need of a wide receiver calls San Francisco about Jauan Jennings because they are so deep, and then the Niners in turn could get some good value back. Because I think if you look at this team, Larry, going into the 2025 season, when Jauan Jennings is an unrestricted free agent, he's not going to be with this team because he's going to be able to go somewhere and get that Kendrick Bourne type of deal that Bourne got with the New England Patriots. And realistically, I think that Jauan Jennings, with how clutch he is and how good he is on money downs and him coming through in the pressure cooker, how he played in the Super Bowl, turning a lot of heads for the casual fans who didn't know about him, he can get a deal if he produces between $8 to $12 million. And there's no way that the Niners are going to pay him that. And if they do deal Jennings, they get value back. Ricky Pearsall takes over out of the slot. You have Ayuk, Debo, Pearsall, Jacob Cowing, Ronnie Bell, Danny Gray, Chris Conley. You're still a really good team. Now, of course, you miss some of the cultural aspects that Jauan Jennings gives you. Toughness. He's a rugged player. He's physical. He'll drive players into the ground, into the bench. He's a great blocker. He always comes up on some of those massive plays in clutch situations. But you look at a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers, they have been starving for a wide receiver. They traded away Deontay Johnson. Clearly, they didn't like him all that much because they have George Pickens right now as their number one. And get this, Roman Wilson, who's a slot rookie, has been getting outside snaps. He's not an outside guy, in my opinion, because he's a little bit small. Good speed, but he's smaller. I think that he can be maximized as a slot receiver. Jauan Jennings has a little bit more height, so maybe Pittsburgh would like him and they could trade for him. And it's not the Niners wide receiver maybe that they had really wanted in a Debo or an Ayuk, but it's still a really good player who kind of fits that culture for Mike Tomlin of doing it all for the team. And Jennings is all about that. So I think that Jennings will play for the Niners in 2024, but if he gets dealt, I wouldn't be surprised, because maybe the Niners had this planned all along where we're going to draft Ricky Pearsall. He can be that slot guy, knowing that Jennings either way isn't going to be with this team most likely in 2025.
There's some good receivers that are going to get cut or
Yeah.
not going to be with the Niners. I mean, it's just simple as that.
Yeah.
They've got 10 or 11 guys that can really play, and somebody's going to move. And I don't know if maybe it's Danny Gray, maybe these guys all get cut. Maybe it's Jauan Jennings getting moved, but I thought that was interesting. And I read that yesterday. Steelers still having interest in now Jauan Jennings. All right. You put out a tweet about your left to right offensive line, your ideal offensive line. And I commented on it, and I think it's an interesting discussion, because I think the only thing that's really set is Williams and Banks on the left side. And everything else, I think Colton McKivitz is probably the right tackle, but now there's Hubbard, who's a veteran competitor. And then Brendel, the story of the week is that Brendel's got tendonitis in the knee, and so he's not playing center. Feliciano's playing center in the minicamp. And then they drafted, Dominic Pooney, and I loved Pooney's answer when I said to him, "Hey, man, you're a nasty finisher. That's the book on you." And he's like, yeah. So I love Pooney, and I think he's in the mix. I'd love to see him start. I've heard great things about Kingston. I loved what I've seen so far out of Nugent, as far as just he's so wide. He's 6'1", but he's really, really broad. So it's like, that's what you're looking for in an offensive lineman, wide-bodied guys, and that's what Drake Nugent is, and he was good at Stanford. He was great with Michigan. What do you think? Left to right, what's the best Niner offensive line? The one thing that seems like it's almost a guarantee is that there's going to be some competition at offensive line for the starting spots this summer.
No doubt. And you know what the left side is going to be. It's going to be Trent Williams at left tackle, still the best at that position in the game. It's going to be Aaron Banks at left guard, who's been very, very good the last couple of years. But center, right guard, right tackle is such a fascinating positional battle that I think is going to be one of the marquee storylines and developments of training camp here. Because as you mentioned, you can go with a couple of different options at that center spot, which then changes what you do at right guard. You can go John Feliciano, who in 2022 is the full-time starter at center for the New York Giants. He played solid, 971 snaps at center that year. Overall Pro Football Focus grade of 58.2, pass blocking 65.9. That's about league average. Run blocking of 57.1. He had 6 penalties, 3 sacks, 3 hits, and 22 pressures. Those 22 pressures from the interior, not great, but Feliciano is coming off a year in which he was the top 15 right guard in the NFL. Yeah. He played pretty well. So if you go Feliciano at center, what happens at right guard? You could go Spencer Burford. You could go Dominic Pooney. I think the fact that Pooney is already the second string right guard is good for his chances at maybe starting this year. But elsewhere at center, you could go Drake Nugent, who has good movement skills, a good body, not a lot of bad losses on tape at Michigan and Stanford. And he's a really just strong, stout, thick player, as you mentioned. Jarrett Kingston, a lot of people think that he could play center. You've talked about how Pooney played really well at center at the Senior Bowl to rave reviews. So you can go with a couple of different options there. And then, of course, as I mentioned, that changes the right guard spot. Burford, Pooney, Kingston, Feliciano. At right tackle, I think it's going to be Colton McKivitz, just for the sense of continuity, and the Niners are banking on him being a little bit better. Honestly, he may have been better in 2023 than Mike McGlinchey was in 2022, right? Or you could go with Chris Hubbard, who's been in the league for 10 years. He started a lot of games last year with Tennessee on a bad team. He actually performed pretty well and put up better Pro Football Focus numbers than Colton McKivitz. So center, right guard, right tackle, going to be a really, really interesting training camp battle. And the Niners have a bunch of different options. Are they great options? Unfortunately not. but it's going to come down to how they see fit and how they configure it.
It's such an interesting thing because it's like, do you go with, kind of the safe approach, which would be like, hey, go with Brendel, go with Feliciano at right guard, or do you go with more of the youth? You go with Burford and Nugent and Pooney and guys that may have higher upside, but also may get your quarterback hit a couple times early in the year. To me, that's going to be really interesting to see kind of like, how do they take any risks? Do they gamble? Like, to me, Pooney's got the most upside of the options at right guard. Do they go with Pooney and kind of just, live with whatever early mistakes he's going to make, knowing that, man, when you get to late in the year, that guy could be the guy? Or do they keep going with Brendel, who's, kind of an undersized, underpowered guy? He's about 285. He got worked by DJ Reader in the Cincinnati game pretty bad. I think he's got some strength issues. I know he was a Pro Bowl alternate a year ago, but I don't know. I mean, to me, I think that I'd look to upgrade center and right guard if I could, any way I could. Because if you come back with the same line, I don't know that that's going to be enough this year. I think they're going to need to be upgraded there somehow. I don't know if going with Brendel and Feliciano is where I would go.
And the counter to that from people is, well, the Niners averaged 30 points per game. They had the best offense in the NFL. Why not run it back to have that continuity? Well, I'm not content with just being good, right? I want to be great. And I think that the Niners might need to make some changes along that offensive line. Why? Because against some stout defensive lines the last couple of years, that offensive line unit has really held them back. And you talk about Jake Brendel being a Pro Bowl alternate. I just think that it took him a while to be a starter in this league for a reason, for the lack of strength. He got pushed around and bullied by some physical interior defensive linemen. And so if you make a change there and you have Dominic Pooney at right guard, I immediately think that you improve your offensive line. Now, you might have to go through some ups and downs with a new offensive line unit, and that might impact the offense at least a little bit, but you're not trying to peak early in the year. You're trying to build yourself up to the point where you can finally win a Super Bowl. And part of the reason why the Niners haven't been able to reach the mountaintop and get over the hump is because of poor offensive line play. So that offensive line last year was not good enough. So why not at least experiment with some changes in the trenches?
Is the quarterback depth chart set, do you think, or do you think it's fluid? Because, I mean, I was talking to Clay Kubiak and Brian Greasy about Mordecai. They really like Mordecai. And then when I look at Brandon Allen, I think, well, in a lot of ways, Brandon Allen has as much experience as Josh Dobbs. And it's like, yeah, in our mind, it's Purdy's the 1, Dobbs is the 2, Allen's the 3, Mordecai's the 4. But when you take a close look at it, I kind of wonder if that thing is fluid and up for debate. And like, what if Mordecai plays really well in the preseason? What if Brandon Allen moves the team better in the preseason than Dobbs? Could Allen be the 2 and Mordecai be the 3? Could Dobbs get cut? And the assumption is that it's going to be Mordecai who gets cut and winds up on the practice squad. And the other 3 guys, and maybe even Allen gets cut. Maybe they go 2 quarterbacks. But I don't know. The more I look at the Niner quarterback thing, to me, it seems like it was designed to be a set hierarchy, but I don't know if it's going to play out the way that they had originally planned.
I know you tweeted out that video. Was Brandon Allen getting snaps ahead of Josh Dobbs when you guys were there?
He was. I mean, there's an order of everything, and Purdy was taking the first rep, Allen was taking the second rep, Dobbs was taking the third rep.
Yeah, and I just wonder if that's the case because Allen was with this team last year, Dobbs was not. But then Grant said that Dobbs went like 9 of 11 or whatever. I know that you're not into training camp statistics, but either way, like this is what Dobbs has been able to do, right? Last year, goes to Arizona. He's going to be the spot starter for Kyler Murray. And if you remember early in the year, Arizona was really feisty. They beat the Dallas Cowboys, and then he gets traded to Minnesota after the Kirk Cousins injury, and he gets traded during the week. And without really any game preparation, he
played
stepped
well.
in after not starting, and he led the Vikings to an incredible win down the stretch on the road against, I believe, Atlanta, where he's making plays with his legs, he's making plays with his arm, and he accounted for 3 or 4 touchdowns. So his ability to master the offense quickly is really impressive. He's a good backup for a couple of starts. Anything beyond that, that's when he starts to struggle a little bit. As for Brandon Allen, he's the backup to Joe Burrow, so he has that. He's very well respected. I think that at some point he's going to be a quality coach in this league, because I get that from everything that I've kind of gathered in listening to him speak and how he conducts his business and earning the respect of Kyle Shanahan. And then, of course, with Zach Taylor, too, with the Cincinnati Bengals. But look, he's so limited and he can't run. He doesn't really have dynamic ability in that way. His arm is completely average. With Tanner Mordecai, it's a player that you at least want to groom and develop. He's got the 4.445 speed. He's got a pretty good arm. He's put up really big numbers at the college level. I think this is a little bit different than the Brock Purdy situation, because, during Purdy's rookie year, I had said, Purdy's too good for this team to cut. He performed too well in the preseason for them to cut him. If they cut him, he is not going to be back on the practice squad. So they have to have him on this 53-man roster. They saw it the same that I did, and he cracked the 53-man roster. A surprise to many, not to me and you, because we were both really impressed with what he was able to do. Mordecai, on the other hand, might be a player that you can cut, put him on the practice squad, and then you can try to develop him into a quality backup, given the intriguing athleticism and the skill set that he does have.
What if Mordecai plays well in a preseason game?
He's got to take the spot over Brandon Allen, I think.
I know, but I mean, think about it from the rest of the league. The 49ers found Brock Purdy and they discovered him. And now here comes like another undrafted free agent, kind of similar, guy who's played a lot of football. Really smart. I mean, I asked Clay Kubiak about him. He's like, he's super. I could give me a word that describes Mordecai. He's like, he's super competitive. Well, that's a great one. And then he said he's really, really smart, and the ball comes out with some pretty good accuracy. Well, I mean, let's just say he plays really well in the preseason, and your team you're the Raiders, and you got Gardner Minshew and the Aiden O'Connell, and you don't really have a solid number one. And the 49ers picked Brock Purdy, and the same group that picked Brock Purdy picked this kid Mordecai, and he looked good in the preseason. Aren't you looking to pick him off? And then in that situation, does Mordecai make your team and you cut loose one of the other guys? A lot of people are like, Krug, you're getting way too excited about Tanner Mordecai, and I get it. But there aren't that many quarterbacks that run 4.45. And when you watch him throw short and intermediate, the ball comes out on time with accuracy and with pretty good zip. And then, you got people around him. Greasy lit up when I started talking to him about, what Greasy told me. He's like, I said, I said, Kyle and John credit you, Brian, with helping them kind of believe in Purdy. And you were charged with looking at the quarterbacks for this draft, and you liked Mordecai. What did you like about Mordecai? And I'm trying to peel the onion on it. And he's like, well, you know what? I'm friends with Luke Fickell. And I talked to Luke Fickell before the draft, and he told me, of all the players I have in this draft this year, if there was one guy that I would stand on the table and scream out loud for, it would be Tanner Mordecai.
Interesting.
He said the guys loved playing for him. There was never any doubt when he broke the hand against Iowa that he was going to play in the bowl game, which was like 5 weeks later, I think, against LSU. He played in that game. He threw for 378 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. They didn't win the game, but he said the guys love Mordecai. He's mature. He's smart. He's a leader. He's humble, but he's also super competitive, and they loved him. And he's the guy that I would pound the table for or jump up on the table and argue for. That, to me, told me that what I'm seeing is real, and that, like, I'm not saying he's Brock Purdy, but I don't think he's a bum, and I don't think he's a guy that for sure is going to lose the quarterback job to Brandon Allen. I think there's a possibility, and it'll be interesting to see if he plays well in the preseason. Do the Niners fear him getting picked off and put him on the team, or do they expose him to the waivers and maybe watch him wind up in in Vegas or someplace. I think it's going to be interesting to watch.
That's of note because Brian Gracie's done a hell of a job with Brock Purdy. Luke Fickell coached Desmond Ridder at Cincinnati, and Desmond Ridder looks as though he's going to be a bust. So for him to be so complimentary of Tanner Mordecai, I think is really interesting. And then you think about what you can build off of, right, with a quarterback. Toughness, team rallying around you, team really likes you, leadership qualities. He put up numbers for 2 seasons in college football for SMU and I believe Wisconsin, or if it maybe
it was Oklahoma. He sat, and then he went to SMU, put up some monster numbers, and then finished the 1 year at
Wisconsin.
At Wisconsin, it was like 9 touchdowns, 4 picks the last.
Okay, the 2 years of really good production were at SMU, which it's a solid level of football.
We're talking about 35, roughly 35 touchdowns, 10 picks.
Exactly. Both seasons too, with a lot of yards thrown. And what can you build off of, right? Athleticism. You've got a quarterback running 4.4, 4.5. That's intriguing. And can you work with his feet? Can you improve his mechanics a little bit? I have seen that maybe the arm motion is a little bit loopy. You can refine those things. Look at some of the changes that Trey Lance was able to make. Look at the changes that quarterbacks can make in that area. And then if you can complete balls and get it out with timing and accuracy, short, intermediate, you can develop that deep ball a little bit. So there's something to work with here, which is why I think you're bullish on him, which is why I think Luke Fickell and Brian Gracie are like, there's something there. And I'm excited to see his development. Those are the types of stories that make preseason football to me a lot of fun. Because when you can see Tanner Mordecai in that 3rd and 4th quarter, like we saw Brock Purdy a couple of years ago in the 3rd and 4th quarter, you can figure out if a player can play or not.
Yeah. And the tight end coach, Brian Fleury, was talking up Mason Pline. He's like, he's getting better at a really fast rate.